there's been a little bit of a narrative recently about MicroStrategy as a refinery. And I really like this. I really like this perspective. And this slide is incredible at showing this perspective. So what MicroStrategy is doing is they're offering the ability to transform Bitcoin exposure into a different product with different risk return metrics. Okay, so you can see on the left-hand slide here, you've got Bitcoin, and this transformation, what MicroStrategy is offering with their convertible debt, allows a company that wants to hold convertible debt. It allows them to get Bitcoin exposure where you reduce the upside, but you also reduce the downside. So you can see this arrow going from the left over to the right here. If you just hold spot Bitcoin ETFs, you would get spot Bitcoin exposure. You would get exactly 1-to-1 like what Bitcoin does, up and down 1-to-1. If you hold MicroStrategy equity, if you go up, you see that there's leveraged exposure. You have potentially more, 1.5 times or more exposure. If you hold a product like MSTX or MSTU, you get even further leveraged exposure. You're getting a 2x multiple of the underlying MicroStrategy equity. And then MicroStrategy options can give you even more leverage on potential Bitcoin exposure. Now, these products can also go the opposite direction. You can, institutional buyers are purchasing these MicroStrategy convertible debt, which can give you something less than 1-to-1 exposure to MicroStrategy. So it's reducing the volatility of the product. So this may appeal to many different capital bases where maybe they don't have the approval to go put Bitcoin on their balance sheet, but they could go buy equity in a company or convertible debt in a company, and they can add convertible debt to their balance sheet. Something that comes to mind, and this is particularly interesting to me in the industry that I work in insurance, the regulatory bodies or the regulatory bodies will not allow you credit. You don't get any credit for holding Bitcoin on your balance sheet. Basically, you're not allowed to lend against it. Now, you can hold equity on your balance sheet, and you can hold convertible debt on your balance sheet, and you can get credit for holding those products on your balance sheet. So all of a sudden, holding a product like this, the MicroStrategy convertible debt, or a MicroStrategy debt product, you have the ability to hold that on your balance sheet and lever against it, basically. So these pools of capital that want exposure to Bitcoin but at a reduced volatility metric are incredibly deep. The total bond market, just think about the total bond market, is about $300 trillion. The total convertible debt market is about $800 billion. So if you're talking about MicroStrategy looking to raise $5 billion of convertible debt, that would be an incredibly small portion of the total debt market and an incredibly small portion of the total convertible debt market. So their ability to facilitate this type of product, there's significant headroom to continue to grow the convertible debt market for MicroStrategy, which is offering this Bitcoin exposure at a reduced volatility. It's a complex topic. It's a complex topic, but they're monetizing the stock, right? Like the fact that Saylor is incredibly transparent with what he's going to do. If you buy this product, if you give Saylor $1 billion, he's going to take that $1 billion and he's going to buy Bitcoin with it. And that increases the underlying value of the equity. And as an equity holder, the benefit that you get as an equity holder is that you get the benefit of the excess volatility that the convertible debt holder doesn't want to hold, right? So that chopped off volatility that the convertible debt holder doesn't want to hold, the equity holder then gets that volatility exposure, basically upside and downside. So that's what leads MicroStrategy equity to be a little bit of a levered product. And the next slide, if you go down to the next slide, which is the 30, it just shows, yes, this one, perfect. And this is, this is oil refining. This is comparing MicroStrategy to an oil refinery, right? Like if you just take crude oil, there are many things that you could do to crude oil, and you could talk about the most refined being jet fuel up at the top, and the least refined being bitumen or asphalt down at the bottom. And there's all of these different products that you can make in between. So MicroStrategy is just taking the same framework and transforming this capital into different forms that different capital markets want exposure to.
I want to say this also tells me how incredibly skilled Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy are in building the narrative and explaining the ideas in a simple way that will resonate and will, build on the narrative that's just increasing and improving. So this is another thing that's very interesting. Like, these guys are very creative. They know how to talk to the investors. They know how to explain the value of what they're doing.
Yeah, I think this is spot on. Like, I think the best lens of looking at Bitcoin through is a digital commodity, and I do think that's one of the reasons why it's had this kind of like floor price. It's followed really well. Is this whole idea that Bitcoin, the probability of Bitcoin trading below its production costs is extremely low, which commodities don't normally trade below their production costs. So all these analogies kind of come together and they make a lot of sense. And I really like this. Actually, I haven't seen this slide, but I need to go back and watch all this stuff, because this is it's a great way to explain what they're really doing, because they're taking the digital commodity of the future and then they're have a monopoly on essentially all these ways of refining it, you could say, right? So I like this. I think hopefully it helps people, because it helps me.
It's a genius analogy. I come from some oil and gas background myself, and some chemistry, and I'm very well aware that the modern, the 20th, 21st century society that we have been that society has been based on has been petroleum, has been the petrodollar. Essentially, it's an oil-based economy. Everything that we have, that we make, all of our secondary commodities, all of our pharmaceuticals, our transportation system, fuel systems, they're really based on petrol. So, and since this is digital energy conserved, which it's both an analogy and not in some ways. I think this is a key to driving forward the narrative. So yeah, I agree. I think Saylor really extended what was an analogy, took it to a new level here. I love this. And you can see how you're diversifying into a new Bitcoin-based economy in the same way that petroleum did for us.